2012, shortly after graduating from university, I traveled to Japan, and I joined a small NPO, a small nonprofit, working on the relief effort following the triple disaster that happened in Tohoku, to try and see what I could do to help. So that's not really the point. What I'd like to kind of like highlight is what I saw. So, I was a kid, basically. I was in my early 20s. I'm in my late 20s now, but a couple of years makes a big difference. And so, I wasn't prepared for, sights of devastation or an atmosphere of grief. Like, I wasn't prepared for that at all, and, I went really not understanding what the, psychological toll would be on me, or what the extent of the grief would be in the area. However, that's not what my experience was. Instead, I experienced what was one of the happiest times of my life there. Yes, it was a disaster zone, so to speak, but that label doesn't do justice to the nature of what was happening there. People were living, people were loving, and you had this phenomenon called the kasetsu. Well, so the kasetsu literally are temporary housing. So that's where people are given temporary places to live, and it's awful in the sense that they're cramped. They're not insulated properly, and it's terrible. But what my point is, what people did is they converted these kasetsu into spaces of sanctuary, spaces of creativity, and spaces of love. Now, what they did is they turned, these box accommodations, these box residencies into cafes and bakeries and antique shops and galleries and all these really creative, warm places. And as a result, the streets of Ishinomaki, and Onagawa now in particular, became filled with light and life. And that's what I want to talk about. It's this idea of using love as a resource, love as capital, to invest into a situation that is, indescribably awful, and seeing what we can get out of it. So, with particular reference, I'd like to talk about the area in which my mother lives, and I'm there at the moment, and that is here in West London. And of course, I'm referring to the Grenfell Tower fire incident. So let me try and explain what I did. So I took my entire comic book collection over several years. It's a hell of a lot of comics, and I just put them out, and I just said, please take, because I don't have like a whole lot of food or a whole lot of clothes or a whole lot of money to give, but I thought I can give a piece of me. What can I give? And I thought, well, there's my comic book collection. That's an expression of my love. That may sound odd, but my comic books are units, in effect, a matter of currency through which I can translate my love into the world. So I laid them out, and I left a message, and it said, please pick up a comic for free, and leave a message for the next person. And I left them near Latimer Road Station. It was a terrible choice area, because that is kind of like the epicenter. People are very frustrated and so on, and moving around. And I left it for a day, and I came back. People had taken loads of comics, but no one had left a message. They had also taken the table the comics were on. Now, let me explain what just happened. Is I had taken some love. I had taken some portion of my love, and I put it in a hit like an air, a zone of impossible grief. Now, what is the result? Obviously that love would be consumed, and it would be very hard for people to give anything back because of the extent of the grief. So, luckily, that following day, people had begun to open up similar spaces. They had begun to open up spaces for kids to do arts and crafts. They had begun to, open up spaces where people can sit down and talk to each other. And, similar spaces had begun to open up. And I tried again. This time, I laid out the remainder of the comics. I laid out a rug, and not a rug, but like a cloth, a colorful cloth, to literally frame the space. And I put it up against the wall near one of the spaces where some kids were doing crafts. And up on that wall, I put up a bunch of art. And some of this art was, a comic art from like series such as the X-Men, which is symbolic in itself in terms of what the X-Men kind of like go through in terms of facing adversity, and some art from anime and so on, and some art from Hey Stories, so original art by like Anne and Martin, and I put that art up. And why did I do that? Well, simply because to create a space, to create a safe, creative space where people could, walk onto that carpet and for a moment in those 4x4 square feet, just look at something sort of beautiful, displace themselves in time, and just witness an act of love, and not just from me, but from the artists and from within Hey Stories, and the artists who did the comic book and manga art and so on. And I left a message, and again I said, pick up a comic, please leave a message for the next person who comes by, and also feel free to put up your own art or your own pictures to add to like this mini gallery. So what I've done is I've asked people to become involved in the act of spreading love, because love is capital. That's what I'm trying to argue, but it's different from money, because money, once you invest it's a finite resource. It comes and goes, and yes, it moves from one person to the other, but money doesn't necessarily generate more of itself out of nothing almost, but love does. By investing a certain amount of love, it generates more of it potentially. So of course my first attempt, it was complete, my investment of love as an artistic resource, was consumed by the grief. But however, this time, I had partaken in a collection of spaces which were now doing something similar to what I was trying to do. And in that sense, the space had more legitimacy, and there was just more love. There was just more love in that area, to kind of make it possible for any acts of art to exist, and acts of love to exist. So I left it for a day, and then I came back, and again people had taken comics, and again someone had taken the table, but someone had left a message, and it was only one message, but it was a long message, and it was from someone's heart. But and someone had left this message, and the message was one of sorrow. It was one of acknowledgement, of sadness, but it was also one of solidarity, and that is the way the community had chosen, or the members of the community who had written this message had chosen to use the space, is to show solidarity to the next person who would come by. And that's what I tried to do, is I tried to give people a space in which they could take ownership of the kind of messages they wanted to share with people, of the kind of things they wanted to express, and within using art as kind of like a safe space. And then that act of sharing a message, that act of creatively leaving a message for someone, is an artistic act. Love is an interesting resource, because it's as well as being used as capital, it's also the raw material for art. Art is created through the investment of love, And that is basically what happened. Now, it's still there. The art, the comics, they're still there. The paper from messages, the blue tack for people to put up their art, it's all still there. But I'm not going to go back. I'm not going to go back to check, because it's really difficult and very emotional for me to keep going back to the site. So I'm just going to leave it, and I'm going to do as intended, and leave it for people to make of the space what they will. Whether they choose to add their own art, whether they choose to add messages, whether they choose to sit down and read comics, whether they choose to take comics away with them, whether they choose to do away with the space altogether. My purpose was to create a space for people to do with as they will. And this takes me on to why I'm saying this, why I'm telling you about this. And that is that the point of Hey Stories is to unify creativity and imagination with love, with activism and progressivism, and this idea of inclusion and hope and healing. And I want to encourage, you know, everyone who sees this video to invest their own love into something that they care about. It can be your family, it can be your community, it can be people really, really far away. But I encourage us all to make our own spaces where you know, we can generate love for one another. That is what I'm encouraging you to do. You can do what I did, or you can do something completely different. You know, the sky is the limit, and well, greater than the sky. You know, our hearts are the limit, and as deep as our hearts are, we can come up with anything. And that's I'd love to see kind of like what you do and the spaces that you create. And just a few tips. So. You know, based on my experience, you know, it's evident that you know, it's like painting. You know, working with love. You know, you actually need practice. You actually need to. It needs to not work once or twice for you to kind of like get an idea. So don't let yourself be disheartened. And it's hard. You know, it's hard giving love, because it makes you vulnerable. And what people do with that space, in the sense they're doing that to you, is how I felt. And that's really hard. That's really kind of like almost in a small way kind of traumatic. And that's why I encourage you, you know, if you are going to set up a space, a creative space, I recommend that you do it with friends or with family or with people that care about you. So stay safe. Never do anything that puts you at risk, because you know, my basic motto is you know, never die, never kill. You know, you've got to live, and we've got to preserve life. And yeah, so make sure you're safe. And you know, there are other things, like if you can work within a space where other people are creating similar spaces, you know, it protects your space. You know, there's strength in numbers almost, but it's more of a case of there's just more love invested in the area. So do take all of that into account. And you know, the beauty of art and the beauty of giving art to the world is that only you can create what you're about to create. Only you, that is literally a piece of you here in this space, in the world, in the material world. You know, Jim Carrey talks about this idea that we are not our bodies, we are the energy, we are the life that emanates from within us and expands beyond our bodies. And that's the way I encourage us all to live, you know, with sharing our love with the world. And I think that you know, through acts like these, we can make a difference to 1 or 2 people, or 5 people, or 10 people, or 100 people. Everyone talks about feeling they can't make a difference, but we can. Like, we actually can. It is a matter of changing our relationships with one another and brightening up someone's day. And you know, if enough people have lighter hearts, then the world will change. So that's one way in which we can do that. So I'm also going to be releasing 2 posters, which you can use if you want, at your own discretion. One of them is of one of the Hey stories' really big characters, Asem, who's a heroine who possesses super empathy. She draws her power from the thoughts and feelings of others, and it's going to be her, and it's going to say love across it. And then we're going to have another one, which is going to be Iconoclast, who is technically our antagonist, but she's a little more complex than that. And her whole thing is creating her own path in life, and forging her own version of the world. And for her, the motto is going to be resist. I think that you can't resist without love. So do take that in mind. Never engage in any violence. Never engage in anything that would put you or others at risk. But yeah, I'm going to put out these 2 posters done by our artists Mariah and Anne, respectively, and for you to use as you will. So that'll be a later post. But yeah, so do go out and create your spaces and touch people's hearts, and talk to us. So send us messages or leave comments under this post, or either on YouTube or on Facebook, and let us know how your spaces worked out, how you found the experience, and we will be here to support you. So yeah, love, imagine, and speak, and we'll see you soon.